back to the channel. So in this video, we're going to be sharing my story. It seems like every couple of, well, I say it seems like every couple of months or something like that, I like to share my story just so that everybody kind of gets reintroduced to me, because I know that my story is incredibly different. I used to be a Christian. I used to be Baptist, and I walked away from Christianity permanently. And I'm realizing I took an incredibly different route. And it makes sense why I interact with a lot of people, and it seems like nobody shares in the experiences with kind of my story. And if you do, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. But for the most part, it seems like I don't find too many people who have had the kind of similar thing. So first of all, I want to go ahead and open up and say, hi, my name is John. This is the Desert Spring. The purpose of the channel name is the Desert Spring. So what is that? Well, it was an idea that came to me as I was walking away from Christianity, and the desert, and that idea was that, God's source, or the whole of consciousness, whatever you want to call it, exists as this free spring that you can tap into, and anybody can tap into, that is in the middle of a desert, and it's open for anybody to access it. But religion and Christianity and whatever religion tends to put their fences around it, tends to put their walls up to guard it. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and get into my story. I grew up, also, by the way, guys, right down at the bottom right, you see my email, desertspring111@gmail.com. Also, I forgot to mention, before we even start, I'm going to have a live stream on, what did I say, Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock Central. So we're going to be going live. I'm going to have a phone number that you guys can call in, and we're not mocking Christianity. We're not all that kind of stuff, We're not debating Christianity. We're not debating. All the purpose of is for me to support you in your grief, in your walking away from Christianity. Now, with that being said, I love everybody anyway. And so if you just want support in something that you're going through, maybe you had a family member that passed away, or maybe you had a pet that passed away, and you just want a person that is not going to judge you and, kind of just have a conversation with a stranger, feel free to call in, and I'm always happy to support you and to listen to you. With that being said, to kind of keep the sanctity, God, what a Christian word, but to kind of keep the safeness of the space, I'm not going to be posting any of the live streams. So it's going to be live, and after the live stream is done, the live stream's not getting posted. There's no part of the live stream that's ever getting posted. They're completely, in the moment type of videos. So you can come on, you'll be able to interact with me, and after I stop the stream, that's going to be it. So, anything that you share, you don't have to worry about a sound clip of you kind of going all over the internet. That's not going to happen. Well, I can't guarantee, if somebody's watching and they're recording and they're doing a video recording or a screen recording or something like that, right? But for the most part, this is going to be kind of a space where you can call in anonymously. You don't have to share any of your information. And you can just talk to me, tell me what you're going through, and I'm happy to support you. If you want advice from me, I'm always happy to give advice, but I've been through a lot of shit in my life, and I also understand that sometimes people just need to be heard, and they just need a hug and nothing more. And so I'm happy to offer that to you. So Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Central Time, that's when we're going to be doing the live stream. So the first one is going to be happening next week. That's going to be, I don't even know what today's date is, the 15th. So, my back. That'll be the 22nd, I guess. So that's going to be next Wednesday. So the 22nd at 8 p.m., that's going to be the first live stream. The videos that I put out, I'm going to be mentioning it too, so that way anybody who watches it and wants support through that, show up to the live streams, and I'm happy to kind of hold space for you to share what you're experiencing on, what you're struggling in life. With that being said, let's get into it. So, my story when I left Christianity, I grew up insanely Christian. Insanely Christian. Like, independent fundamental Baptist. The church that so starting off very, very young, I was basically kind of nothing, right? Because my mom initially was Catholic and my dad was, I think, Church of Christ. I don't know that I was created at that point. They might not have done the deed, or maybe they just did the deed and I was in the oven. I don't know. But I know that I don't really ever remember my mom being a Catholic. Maybe I just didn't remember. But kind of when my memories started coming around and kind of my conscious awareness started coming around, we were Episcopal. So we went to Episcopal church. That's relatively similar to Catholics. They have a lot of the same kind of, you go in, you have these, maybe you don't have this rosemary thing, but you still have the very Catholic feel to it. There's a priest up at the front okay, I don't remember a damn thing about being Episcopal. I just remember that if I go up to the big dude that had all the crazy clothes on, he'd give me this little cookie. And that was my experience being Episcopal. So they always said that I was a saint because I'd always be up at the front trying to get cookies out of the dude with the dress on. But from there, we eventually moved to being Baptist. And that happened to me when I was 6 years old. I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior at 6 years old. That was in 2002. And we stayed Baptist ever since. So basically from 6 years old all the way up until I was about 24, 25, we were Baptist. I was Baptist. And yeah, we did the Baptist thing. I mean, I really don't know what to say. We went to church. We had all the classical struggles that families have, except we had Jesus to help us along. Whatever that meant, But yeah, we just had we were doing the Christian thing. So eventually, my childhood in general was incredibly treacherous. Just because we were Christian, that didn't mean a damn thing. I was incredibly abused, sexually molested. Parents didn't do anything about it. Not by the church or anything like that, by family members. And, incredibly abused by my father the whole time growing up. Just an extremely toxic family. The whole purpose of my existence was just to support my parents as they got older. I wasn't meant to go to college. I wasn't meant to become the person I am. I wasn't meant to have an independent path. My parents let me know when I was about 12 years old that the only reason why I existed was because they were needing a person around the house that could help them in their business, and when they became older, that could help them as they became older and kind of help them with stuff. So basically, the whole reason why they created a human being was because they wanted a fucking servant. So now I get to deal with the, with the realities of, reality, and all that kind of shit, because they decided they wanted to, do the deed. With that being said, so I had a pretty dark childhood. I was incredibly abused. I hated my family. And by the time I was 10 years old, maybe 9 years old, by the time I was 8 years old, I was pretty dead set that I hated my family. And by the time I was 10 years old, I was dealing with, I don't know how much of YouTube I can get away with saying this stuff, but, where you decide to terminate your beingness. I don't know how to say it without YouTube getting upset, even though I've not had any videos flagged, but, basically by 10 years old, I was already ready, to kind of make the exit from this planet. And that stuck with me basically for the rest of my life. That did not change. Nothing the way that I was treated changed. I just an incredibly abused person by the time I was 12 years old. I considered myself a very broken person. I'd gotten cheated on many times in my life. People walked away from me. Um, and it's, stuff happens, right? So, not trying to grab sympathy from y'all. I'm just giving you the kind of, this is what happened. And so that way you guys can kind of understand. Now, while I was going through all of this, I was really pissed off at God in general, because where the fuck was the guy? Why was my life so fucking hard? And why wouldn't he fucking intervene if he knew that I was going through so much dark shit, right? So, by the time I was 15 years old, 16 years old, the darkness inside of me had only grown exponentially to the point to where I was willing to do certain acts to, finish off the beingness of certain people in my family, to the point to where there's a few times where I got incredibly hot-headed that I almost went forward with, kind of finishing off my family. And people always hear that from me, and they always think, oh man, this is really, really dark. Yeah. I mean, I was kind of I was abused since day one. It's kind of like a puppy dog. You take a puppy dog, and the puppy dog is a beautiful puppy dog, and it loves everybody, and it just wants to be held and squeezed, and it wants to play, and it wants to be kissed. But as that puppy dog grows up, if every day you walk up to that puppy dog and you just start kicking the shit out of that puppy dog and throwing rocks at that puppy dog, and every day as that little puppy gets older and older and older, it's only known getting kicked on, getting stomped on, getting rocks thrown at it, getting beat with a stick, that puppy dog is not going to be a loving, gentle, sweet puppy dog, right? So as an adult, I was dealing with this. I was dealing with this really, really dark rage that I had in me that was all of my past and all of my childhood, and still the way that I was getting treated, because just because I turned an adult doesn't mean that the way your family treats you suddenly changes. No, even as an adult, I was still getting shit on. I was still getting crapped on, still getting made fun of publicly. I was the butt of every joke, and, everybody would make a joke at my expense, and it didn't fucking matter because it was John, and he's a piece of shit dumbass who's not going to have a future anyways. According to my father, the most that I would ever accomplish is popping out a few kids. That's the farthest I'd ever get in life, is I'd pop out a couple of kids. So, when you hear that at 14 years old, 12 years old, it tends to build up a lot of pissed off rage, right? Especially when their grand plan is to keep you around like a little servant boy so that they have somebody to wipe their asses when they're in their 80s. So you can imagine the amount of pissed offness that I had with God in general growing up, especially being cheated on multiple times. Every single time I got cheated on, I kind of went into, I remember perfectly these moments that I had in my backyard when I was a kid. The one thing that I did like about our backyard is that even though we were in the city, we had a lot of land. Relatively speaking. I mean, we didn't have any, we had half of an acre of land inside the city. And every single one of those fences was kind of covered with bushes and shrubs. There were chain link fences, but they were just so overgrown with weeds that it was basically, a private little yard. And I did like that because half of an acre inside of Houston is quite the bit of land. So I would be outside, in the middle of the night. I grew a really, really comfortable relationship with the dark because that's when everybody was gone. That's when everybody was sleeping. That's when everybody was leaving me alone. And I felt very comfortable in the dark. And so I would go outside and I would go on these long walks to try to comprehend my existence, to try to let off steam, to try to process relationship trauma, stuff, whatever, right? Very often during those walks, I would be raising my fist up to the sky, pissed off, flicking off the stars, saying, fuck you, God, for creating me. I hate this fucking existence. I don't want to exist. I never wanted to exist. Fuck you for creating me, right? Those were my words that I carried with me. It was, fuck this life, fuck my life, fuck my family, fuck you. That was basically my Lord's Prayer. So not a great relationship with anybody in my family or in my life. And so how did I deal with that? Well, I didn't. I dealt with that by getting into a relationship like so many people do when they are looking for a savior. And when I say looking for a savior, I mean to take them out of a rut that they are in, right? At that time in my life, I just wanted to be, I wanted to feel like somebody that was lovable. I wanted to feel like a person who mattered, right? Because my entire life felt unloved and I didn't matter, right? And then you could throw on top of that I was just a discarded piece of garbage, right? My sister feels the same way. My sister, there's 12 kids in our big, ginormous shitstorm of a family. My sister and I are the blackest of black sheep. If we were a color, it'd be Vanta Black. We were just the two people in the family that nobody wanted to acknowledge were a part of the family. And so my sister, my mom ended up hating her so much that she sent my sister off to another country to go live with her grandmother just so that she didn't have to see my sister, didn't have to interact with my sister. But even from another country, my mom was setting such intense rules that it was basically like, I don't want you here in my presence, but I still want to make your life a living hell, right? So with me, I got to just live with a fucking living hell. And I'm not comparing my sister. My sister's had an incredibly tough life, and, her and I have clinged on to each other in our darkest moments, knives in our hand. For me, I was never a knife guy. I was always a gun in my mouth guy. And so we've always clinged to each other in these really dark moments. So I eventually found my ex-wife. Whenever her and I came together, we trauma bonded. She had a really, really dark family. She was the black sheep of her family. She had a mind that wasn't accepted by her family because she thought outside of the box. I was the same way. And so we bonded over being rejects. And we had an incredibly intense bond. I loved her so much. But neither of us were healthy people. And so because of that, we had a really difficult marriage. I was not a healthy individual. She was not a healthy individual. We would fight often. Things are supposed to be relatively easy in a relationship, which that's not true. But, our idea at the time was that things are supposed to be relatively easy in a relationship and smooth going. But we were just fighting all the time. Well, the reason why we were fighting is because both of us, our entire lives, have had everything stripped away from us. And so, literally too, multiple times in my life, my brothers would just come into my room and just smash all my belongings for fun. They would just break all my stuff. And I can't tell you the amount of rage I would go to sleep, just fantasizing about ending them. I would want it so bad, you know. And oh God, I can't believe I went through all that shit. I know there's people who've been through more, but every time I think about my childhood and what I've gone through, I always just feel so bad for myself. I'm like, no one should ever fucking be treated that way, which is the reason why I'm here. I mean, it's you know, it's created who I am today. And so am I happy about it? No. I would much rather be a person who was born into a billionaire family. I'd love to be a Rockefeller. No. Just have it easy. No, but yeah, you know, so, you know, I coped, had very unhealthy coping mechanisms, very dark, unhealthy coping mechanisms, things that I did that I'm incredibly ashamed of, and I'll never mention them, and you don't need to know what they are, but they were incredibly dark coping mechanisms. And they stemmed from how much I hated myself, how much I hated everybody, and how much I hated my existence, and how much that leaked into hating everything and everyone. And so, you know, at a certain point, my family became extremely afraid of me. You know, and they started calling me a monster. I don't know if you guys had seen that video that I did a long time ago. A long time ago, just maybe a month ago, where I reacted to a judge, a courtroom judge. It was a case between a father suing his gay son because his gay son, you know, his father was threatening to kick his son out of the house, and they settled on deconversion therapy. And the son didn't go through with the deconversion therapy because he was getting abused beyond measure. And in that video, I lost my shit a little bit. I did. I really did. You know, what really touched me was whenever he said that he was being called a monster and a demon. And that really struck a chord with me. And I can't tell you how many times my family has called me a monster and a demon. And the absolute rage that would build up inside of me, that would make me want to do, you know, completely, you know, things that, you know, humans should never even consider doing to other human beings. I was absolutely ready to do to every member of my family, because my scream inside, with all my anger and all my rage inside, my scream inside was, you fucking created this monster, right? Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional. But it was, you fucking created this monster. You fucking created this demon, right? You guys think that there's something possessed inside of me. The only thing that's inside of me is a person who's screaming to be loved and who's ready to fucking kill all of you because of the way you've been treating me, right? And so, yeah, you know. And so whenever he said in that video that, you know, they'd called him a monster, said that he was a monster, that's the reason why I kind of lost my shit a little bit. It's a bit of a trigger for me. But yeah, you know, I mean, that was my childhood. I knew nothing but rage. I knew nothing but hatred for my family and for myself and for life and for all life and everything, and for God and for everything. I couldn't fathom how I could be a Christian and be doing my devotionals and being treated the way that I was being treated. You know, Jesus is supposed to rescue me. Jesus is supposed to be by my side. Jesus is supposed to comfort me. And here I am screaming out for Jesus, and the motherfucker left the phone off the hook because he wanted to go on vacation, you know. And so because of that, the dreams that I had, it was nightmares every night. In Christianity, they considered it to be demonic dreams that I was having constantly, you know. But what it came from is just, my subconscious reflecting how I felt about myself. There was a lot of self-harm. I would beat myself often. I'd bang my face against 2x4s often. I'd cut myself often. I'd strangle myself often. I'd just do everything that I could to just demonstrate how much I hated life and how much I hated existing. And give me a second. So, nobody has any business treating themselves that way, but there's people who do all the time. So you can kind of consider me the voice of the people who hate themselves, right? And so the first time I got cheated on, I started playing Russian roulette with myself. And I started playing Russian roulette with myself on nights that I was just really done. I had a revolver and I had one bullet inside the chamber. It was a little 6-shooter, 38 special. And when I was really just done, I'd look up at the ceiling of my bedroom. My bedroom was disconnected from the house. At this point, we had kind of the main house, and then we had kind of like a dog house that was just like a little apartment, and that's where I wanted to be because I didn't want to be near family. Some nights when I would really go through it, I'd look up at the ceiling, and I would just curse everything. I'd curse God. I'd curse my existence. And I'd fucking spin the chamber, and I'd look up at the ceiling and it'd say, "Let's see how much you love me." Click. And I'd go throughout life. I'd do my other thing, and something else would happen. My dad would sabotage my business. I tried to start a business. My dad didn't want me to be independent. My dad didn't want me to start anything outside of him. And so he stopped paying me, got me fired, all sorts of stuff so that I couldn't go anywhere. And it was another round of, I fucking hate this life. I fucking hate this place. You want to see how much I care about this fucking life? Let's see how much you love me. Spin and click. And so when I found my ex-wife, that's why I say is that I was kind of looking for a savior. I was looking for a person to make me feel like there was a reason to be alive. Make me feel like there was a reason to to exist. And I thought I found it in her. And at the time, I was reaching for anything. And she was not a very stable buoy, but she was a buoy. And I grabbed onto her extremely tightly, refused to let go. And obviously, kind of being that, that attached to a person is not healthy. And so, you know, anytime she would want to leave me, I it was another gun in my mouth, spin of the chamber or spin of the cylinder, and another click moment, you know. Um, so, we tried to make it work. We were married for about 4 years, 5 years, no, 4 years, 3 years, 4 years. We were married for a while, and we had separated multiple times. It was just dramatic. The whole thing was just dramatic, and there's a reason why it was dramatic, but I didn't learn why my life was the way it was until I started on my spiritual path. And this is why I make a bit of a differentiation between atheism and spirituality. Is when you leave Christianity, there's a plethora of different paths you can take, and you can take whatever path you want. It genuinely does not matter, right? There's no such thing as a hell. Hell, there's not even such thing as a heaven. I mean, when you die, it just doesn't matter, you know. That's really what it comes down to. Honestly, that's what it comes down to. It just doesn't matter. If you want to be atheist, be an atheist. If that's what makes you happy, be happy. I mean, at the end of the day, that's all that matters is, are you happy, right? But so I'd gone to college, and at the time I was wanting to be a doctor, all this kind of stuff. You know, my ex-wife and I were on good terms again, and you know, we were just kind of doing the thing. I was going to college, which once again, my family didn't. Initially, they didn't like it because once again, you know, I'm the stupid idiot, all that kind of stuff. And so I graduated summa cum laude because fuck them, whatever. So I went to college and started studying science, biology, chemistry, physics, all that kind of stuff. I became an atheist. At that point in my life, you know, I went to church solely as a formality. I held on to the tradition solely because it was tradition, not because I was attached to it, not because Jesus ever showed up for me before in the past. You know, because at that point in my life, Jesus never showed up for me. And to be frank, I don't even know why I was even holding on to the dude. So, what happened? I was in college, and oh yeah, that's right. Then I started studying plants, the complexity of plants, and all this kind of stuff. I was doing my own research, and that's kind of what started to put me a bit on a skeptical path of towards atheism too. And so I remained that way, skeptical of God, skeptical of atheism. At that point in my life, I had already seen, you know, judge me as you wish. I don't give a shit. At that point in my life, I'd already seen a UFO as a young child. My dad dropped me off in the woods about an hour and a half north of Houston, and abandoned me for a weekend. I was, you know, who knows why the fuck he did that, but he did that. So he dropped me off in the woods. He left me with a rifle. I guess his dad had done the same thing to him. He didn't feel the need to do it to any of my brothers, but he felt the need to do it to me. So he, you know, I wanted to go hunting. He didn't want to go. He said, if you want to go so damn bad, I'm just going to go drop you off. Hunting was one of my coping mechanisms. So, like I said, I was a hunter, but I wasn't hunting for the right reasons. And so, you know, he dropped me off. He dropped me off there at the weekend and left me alone there in the woods. So I was about 12 years old. And, first time I saw a UFO was 3 o'clock in the morning. Scared the damn shit out of me because I'm a 12-year-old boy alone out in the woods, and I'm seeing this shit up in the sky. And, I know at that point in my life, or maybe I was 13 or 14. No, I was young. I was like 12, maybe 12, 13. But the whole point is, I know what a plane looks like. I knew what a satellite looked like. I'd been an avid stargazer, considering that I became a night person. Stargazing was a very, by the time I was about 9 years old, stargazing became a pretty important part of my life to kind of ground myself in reality and in the fact that we are just little tiny ants that exist on an ant mound called Earth. And so college, graduated college. Well, in my senior years, when my ex-wife decided that she was actually going to leave me. We'd had a lot of kind of false breakups before, but this one was permanent and rocked me to my core. I didn't know where to go, didn't know what to do. The only person that had been my quote-unquote savior was now leaving me because of how toxic of an individual I was. She was also toxic. I'm not going to take all the blame on myself. I mean, she did things that were they were just atrocious. I mean, you just don't do that, especially to your partner. I mean, that's, it was basically like, yeah, well, we're not going to get into that. It was incredibly abusive. Nothing physical, nothing ever physical between her and I. All emotional. And really just fucking used me. I mean, she admitted that the only reason why she ever married me was because she needed a person to pay for her college. And I was the dummy there with money that was looking for a person, So, yeah. I mean, that really sucked. She told me she never had any intentions of having kids with me, and she just needed somebody to pay for college, and so, shattered my ability to think that I could find a woman, shattered my ability to think that women were genuine, that there were such thing as genuine women out there. I really went through my I hate all women phase, all women are tramps kind of thing, and yeah, I mean, that one hurt deeply. And so after I graduated, I didn't have anywhere to go. I lived out of my van a little bit, and eventually stumbled into my grandmother's house one day. My grandmother had died, and at this point, the house had been vacant for a few years, and so why the family was still holding on to it, I don't really know, but I didn't want to go back to Houston because I didn't want to be with family. And I stayed in Corpus. And I was living inside of a rat-infested, raccoon-infested, possum-infested. I mean, it was basically an outdoor arena. Mold everywhere. It was not safe to be inside. It was not safe to breathe inside. And it was a tiny old shit shack. It was quite the shit shack. There was no space for me because my parents are hoarders. And so when I got into that house was filled to the brim. And so it was kind of like stacking boxes and moving boxes that were covered in mold and rat piss and rat shit and cockroaches everywhere and ants everywhere. And it was just a disgusting shit show. But I called it home. And I hated life. The next savior for me was medical school. Mind you, through the entire time of going through my divorce, I was really clinging on to God. I don't know why. Because at that point, the dude had never showed up for me. Right? I was really clinging on to God because I just wanted some sort of hope, some sense of hope. And yeah, I eventually, and I'm going to share my experiences in this video. Sure, why not? I don't care. I already shared the earlier one from when I was a child. There's a few more from when I was younger, but those are kind of irrelevant. And so, and like I said, I mean, if you believe them, cool. If you don't, I don't give a shit. It doesn't bother me. I mean, it doesn't, it doesn't interfere with what I do, anyways, which is just helping people heal. Um, so when I, when I, when I was living in that house, in that shit shack, uh, I mean, that was the hardest thing that I'd ever been through, because on the one hand, on top of I hate myself, and I was grossly overweight because of the divorce, I would stress eating like crazy, and I'd ballooned up to about 312 pounds is as big as I got after the divorce. I was already, yeah, I ballooned up really fast. Um, I was inside that house in a janty fucking bed in a spooky ass fucking place because my grandparents had died in that house and it had just remained shut, and it was just a disgusting place. But I didn't want to be back in Houston because I didn't want to be with my family. And now the city that I had moved to with my ex-wife, my support system had completely disappeared overnight. And now I had no friends, I had no one. And it was, back to playing Russian roulette, right? Um, Sorry, this is a lot to get through, and I'm trying to remember so much stuff. I mean, it's kind of like trauma brain. Like, there's so much shit that happens that it's hard to organize. And does it affect me as an adult? Yes, it does. Does it affect the way that I'm able to operate? Yes, I do my best to do the adult things, but there are very much lasting side effects from my childhood that I have to deal with. And so yeah, so um, I, I'm living in this house, and I'm working in EMS, and you know I'm just seeing people in the hospital. I'm seeing people coding in the hospital, and it's a hospital. There's people dying all over the place, and then after I finish my shift, I'm returning to my little shit shack, and I was attempting to go to medical school, but because of life, a part of me really hates medical schools for this in general. Um, but another part of me, I kind of get it, but at the same time, it's just like, oh, your institutions are trash, and fuck all you guys. So, I graduated summa cum laude. I ended up with a 3.97 GPA. I basically graduated biochemistry major. The only reason why it wasn't officially a biochemistry major is because um, the college that I went to, the advisor, who my advisor was, lied to me, and he told me that the school didn't have a biochemistry major, and that I would only be able to get a biomedical science degree and minor in chemistry, where my minor in chemistry is basically my biochemistry classes. And it was basically all the same coursework. It touched all the same chemistry. The minor in chemistry touched all the same chemistry coursework requirements for the biochemistry degree. But whatever. So, um, and so, I knew how to work. I knew how to get shit done. I knew how to focus. But when your life is falling apart and your marriage is falling apart and you've lost everything and your sense of hope has vanished and you're just sitting back in a crapshoot that you'd hope that you'd never see again. From that point, I was really hoping that medical school was going to save me. I'd applied to a bunch of medical schools. I had already started the application process when my wife divorced me. I hadn't taken the MCAT yet, but I had started the application process. And so once everybody knows, if you're in med school, that first application is your golden application. If you nail that one, you have a good chance of getting into medical school. Every application after that, every year, it just gets harder and harder and harder because you're now just a reapplicant, right? You're just trying to get in. And so medical schools, they go for the cream of the crop. And everybody who doesn't make it, it's a try again next year. See if, and if there's more cream of the crop, they take the cream of the crop, right? And so although my extracurriculars, I had the perfect application. I mean, I had a perfect application. I was talking to Ivy League schools through my first rounds of, through the first round of the application process. Everybody wanted my second round. I gave everybody my second round. And of course that whittles you down, but I still had a lot of really strong schools wanting my business, to be frank, right? $300,000 or maybe $250,000 for a medical school degree. So eventually it got to the point to where I had to study for the MCAT, but I'm going through a divorce right now. So I had rescheduled the MCAT. And then I rescheduled it again. And then I just got to the point to where I couldn't reschedule it anymore. And I wasn't in the space to study. I tried my fucking best to study. I couldn't study. Ended up failing the MCAT miserably. I got a really, really poor grade on the MCAT. I don't think I studied maybe but a collective 10 hours on the MCAT. Just because that was the life that was the card that life dealt. And so, I was sending letters to these medical schools explaining my circumstances, why my MCAT score was so low, reassuring them that, my letters of recommendation are probably some of the strongest letters you'll ever receive. This is something that's completely within my ability, to excel. Please let me in. Please, I'm begging you, let me in. And for the next 6 months, I just woke up to emails that says you're rejected, application rejected. And I had applied to so many medical schools, and it was just like a wave. I'd wake up in the morning and 2 more medical schools had rejected me based off my MCAT. And I'd wake up next day, 2 more medical schools, 3 more medical schools have rejected me based off of my MCAT. Schools that had previously really, really wanted me as a student rejected because of my MCAT. And at that point, I genuinely attempted to end my beingness. Not with a little game of Russian roulette, but I had stole some medication from work that you use for heart attack patients and stuff, and overdosed. I took a lot of that shit. And that was when I left my body the first time. And that process, I had drank a stupid amount of wine because that's all I had. That's all the liquor I had around. I took a ton of melatonin because I wanted it to be as kind of, as kind of, easy as I could make it. I wanted to go to sleep and not wake up. That was the whole idea. And so I drank a little bit of alcohol, took a bunch of melatonin, and took a lethal dose of this drug and went to sleep, hopefully for the last time. And I had my favorite song on, and there was just two songs on. I'm sorry, it was three songs on repeat. I'd made a little playlist. I had my letter. I had a blank check written to my dad so that he could bury me. Um, and the three songs on repeat were all Frank Sinatra because I love Frank Sinatra. And it was My Way, That's Life, and Come Fly With Me. And I just had those three songs on repeat. You know, that's life. I did it my way, and Come Fly With Me. I thought those were appropriate for the situation. And yeah, I went to bed, and I basically experienced the gateway process. That's explained by Robert Monroe from the Monroe Institute. I didn't know that that's what it felt like to separate from your body, but basically I laid there feeling like shit. I knew I was gonna die. I was like, oh, this is it, and I'm ready for it. Fuck this place. Fuck everybody. Fuck myself. And yeah, I started feeling this tugging at my chest. It wasn't. It was like something was grabbing me by my shirt and like yanking me upward like that. And a tunnel appeared, and all these little stars just started racing and created this tunnel. And I just felt this tugging from my chest to like my body to go up into the tunnel. And suddenly I started feeling a lot of vibrations. And I really got scared at that point because I didn't know what the transition was going to be like. So I got really scared. But I just tried to do my best to relax into it. And then it happened. I popped out, and I was just in kind of this black space. This tunnel was in front of me, and I'm now outside of my body, and I just hear this voice beside me that says, "Are you sure you really want to do this?" And I was sitting in that space. I felt so much better. I mean, even just in that separating moment, I felt so much better and so much more at peace. But I didn't want to end my life, you know? And so in that moment, the answer was no. I don't want my life to fucking end. I just want it to be easier. You know, I want a family. I wanted to experience having a family. There were so many things. I wanted to experience a healthy relationship, but I wanted to experience having a beautiful wife, having a beautiful family, all that kind of stuff. I never had kids. And I sat there in that in that space, staring at a tunnel in front of me with this thing beside me, you know, this being beckoning me. Are you going to go, or are you going to stay? And I said, I don't care how fucking I'm stubborn. But it's just, you know, I decided to stay because at the end of the day, I want a family. I have not got to experience having a family yet. I want a family. And so I stayed. That was the only reason why I stayed. Yeah, I want a family. And so eventually I kind of felt myself rejoin into my body that felt like absolute dog shit. Oh my God, it felt like dog shit. And I actually kind of regretted that whole thing. I was like, yeah, I should have stayed. I should have gone the fuck. What the fuck I come back for? But in that moment, that was the first time that I had ever, separated from my body. And so in that moment, I also knew, okay, you don't need to believe this. You don't want to believe this. That's cool. Doesn't bother me. But in that moment, I knew that it solidified it for me. I don't give a shit what you think. Believe what you want. But it solidified it for me that, there's a lot more to life than meets the eye. And so I came back from that experience really emotionally distraught. I went right back to Whataburger to go eat my feelings. And yeah, I tried the whole God thing one more time. And this is where my life really changed. Whereas before it seemed like I was praying out into a void and screaming for God to help and he was never there for me, it seemed like now all of a sudden this guy is showing up, actually. And I just remember in that moment, I prayed to God. I said, look, because in my mind at the time, it was still very much the Christian God. That was kind of my mind at the time. It was still Jesus. It was the whole thing. And so I told God, I was like, look, I don't know what the hell you are. I don't know, what the truth is, because I don't believe Christianity. I think there's so many fucking issues with it. I just don't believe Christianity. And I told God, I was like, look, I'm only going to give this one last chance, because next time I will stay and not come back. But put me on the path that leads me directly to you. I don't care where it leads. I don't care what I have to believe. Just put me on the path that leads me directly to you. And that's what I prayed. And at the time, I was expecting to be a missionary. I'll just be straight. I was really expecting to be a missionary. I was expecting that God was going to bring some sort of pastor into my life, and that I was going to end up going to Bible college, and that I was going to end up being a missionary of some sort. That's genuinely what I thought. That's not what happened. From there, I started to just get these really these random ass things would just pop up in my feed on YouTube. Like, they just don't belong. They, like, none of the topic, because at the time my YouTube feed was basically like firearms, trucks, and science. That was basically my YouTube feed. And out of nowhere, this video for channeling pops up. It very much does not belong in my YouTube feed. You know how YouTube does that occasionally. Call that coincidence? Doesn't fucking matter. Whatever. But this video for channeling popped up. And I got really scared, because if you're a Christian, channeling's demonic. And so, but I kind of remembered my prayer and my oath. You put the path in front of me, I'll walk down the path. I don't care where it leads. Keep me safe, because I know that means I'm going to be going in a lot of sketchy directions. Which I did go in a couple of sketchy directions. So I watched this channeling video. It scared the shit out of me. The lady was like twitching. Her head was twitching. And it looked like she was allowing something to possess her, and it made me really scared and uncomfortable, and I immediately turned it off. But nothing that she said was scary. Matter of fact, everything that she said was actually very loving and very, rest assuring. But it bothered me so much because I was taught that that was demonic. And so I went home, I prayed, God, please don't, I just, that was fucking scary. Let's not do that. I'm still willing to walk, but bro, chill out a little bit. And as YouTube does what YouTube does, once you interact with one video, here comes the next. So I watched that channeling, and I was so scared, but I was so determined to watch the video that I saved it for later and watched it in the middle of the day. And in the middle of the day, I took my Bible, put it on my chest, I whipped out my frickin' 44 mag. No, I'm just kidding. I have no idea what pistol it was, but I had a pistol with me. Oh, no. I was dramatic. I think I had my AK. I had a big fucking firearm with me because I was completely expecting demons to fly through the walls. And because I was just extremely afraid of hell. And I watched that video, and I was insanely uncomfortable watching this person channel whatever the fuck they were channeling. I don't know what they were channeling. Oh, no. I totally butchered this. I butchered the timeline. See, this is what I say. It's like whenever you're trying to remember traumatic events, timelines get all fucked. So before I had attempted to off myself, one of my Christian beliefs was that if you do off yourself, you go to hell. And I thought that was the most bullshit thing ever, because here I was living in actual hell, seeking relief, and the relief I was going to get was you're going to be sought with more hell. And I fucking hated God for that. And so I Googled. I think that's what prompted the channeling content. That might have been what prompted the channeling content on my YouTube. But I looked up, I wanted to hear a story about a person who had committed suicide, because I know people, they attempt to kill themselves, and okay, well, I guess this video is already demonetized. Well, it doesn't matter. It's not like I'm making any money on these videos anyways. It'd be nice one day. But what basically happened was I was trying to find some sense of peace. And so I had watched a video, I just watched one video of a lady who had told her story of her experience of committing suicide. All right, well, fuck it, words out. She was trying to kill herself, and she had committed suicide, and she had an experience. She died for, maybe 3 hours, 4 hours, something like that. And then the hospital brought her back, and she was just kind of sharing her experience of what she experienced in those 3 to 4 hours that she was dead. And so after watching that video, it gave me enough peace that I was willing to, okay, if there is a God, because at that point I really didn't believe that there was a God, but I was like, if there is a God, he is at least not going to throw me in hell for ending my life. So, okay. So then I did it, and then, that happened. I prayed my prayer, and it was like a few days later is whenever that channeling content finally started to come up. All right, so that was the timeline. But I had a lot of Christian beliefs that were screwing with my mind, right? Because here I am watching these videos that say that, God is just love, and God is just the whole of consciousness, and God is just everything and all things, and, there is no such thing as hell, and there is no such thing as heaven, and there is, there's just varying levels of where you want to be when you're outside of your body. And I had understood the principle of being outside the body because I just, attempted suicide, and I just experienced being outside of the body. And so And I also understood the idea that, if you're a happy person and you go outside of your body and now you have an entire universal cosmos to go look for, friends to go hang out with. If you're a happy person, you're not going to go hang around a bunch of negative people. You're going to go find happy people. And if you're a negative person and a really pissed off person and screaming and yelling, you just hate everything, and you get out of your body, well, you are going to go to the place where people are a lot of pissed off and screaming and a lot of fighting and arguing and yelling and all that kind of stuff. If you're a really, really person focused on peace, then you'll find a place that's relatively peaceful, and all this kind of stuff, right? Whatever. This is just what all the channeling content was basically saying. And to me, it made sense, because that, as far as an afterlife is concerned, that's more reasonable, right? That if you do exist beyond your body, which at that point I already knew that I existed beyond my body, because when you do touch that state, you very much know that it feels like you're awake and alive, and you're in your, like, it feels like everyday life, except that your body is laying over there, but you are still you over here, right? Whatever. So once again, if you guys believe me, cool. If you don't, I don't care. It doesn't matter. I say that all the time because I always hear everybody in the comments, oh, you're just, the brain is just a last minute brain. Whatever. Okay. Believe what you want. But yeah, so I started walking down this path, and what started happening was that I started getting really scared, because I was convinced that Satan had snatched me up, and because, believing hell is not real, heaven is not real, Jesus is not God. God is just this existence, this all-encompassing, loving existence, this loving, whatever, that exists throughout the cosmos. At that point, I disagreed with the loving part, because, here I was suffering, living the worst of lives that one can live. I know that there are people living worse than me. I understand that. But yeah, so, my idea that, everybody was, oh, God is pure love. I'm like, I don't know, dog. But yeah, so I got scared a few times. And every time I got scared, I asked God to send a Christian to comfort me. And if he would send a Christian to comfort me, then I knew that he would, that I'm on the right path and I'll continue. But if a Christian didn't come to comfort me, I was going to go right back to Christianity. That was literally what I prayed. And I was dead set on it, because to me, in my mind, I'd gone too far. Jesus is not God. That's a bunch of bullshit. Hell's not real. That's a bunch of bullshit, right? So in my mind of walking away from Christianity, I had, in my mind from walking away from Christianity, I really had just kind of, I had been tricked by the devil. And so I was out, and I was at Whataburger. I was out trying to lose weight and eating their salads and shit. And a lady walks up to me, kind of out of nowhere, just out of the blue. I'm minding my damn business, just eating at a local Whataburger. And she comes up to me, and she's walking out the door, and she stops, and she just says, I don't know why feel like I need to tell you this, but I just want to let you know that God says you're on the right path. And she just walks off. And I'm just like, lady, if you fucking knew what path I was taking, you'd be telling me Satan says you're on the right path. Right? Like, don't fuck with me right now, right? But that was the confirmation that I needed, okay? I asked for a Christian. This was, I guess the assumption was that she was Christian. I don't know for a fact that she was Christian. but she just kind of had a vibe about her, right? Okay, maybe she wasn't Christian. Cool. So maybe I'm still deceived by the devil, whatever. And so I decided, okay, I'll go farther. So I went farther into the channeling content, started researching a little bit more, got scared again. Um, and and so what was happening at this time? This was very much a tumultuous time in my life. A lot of shit was falling apart, and a lot of shit was building itself together, but it was really just a very unsteady point in my life. I decided I was moving to Alaska to get away from my family, because it doesn't matter that I was watching channeling content now. I still hated my family. I had popped it, and I had damn near put a bullet in my dad's face, and so I recognized that I needed to leave my family, or something was going to happen. And so I packed up my car and I moved to Alaska. And I might have messed up the timeline on that too. No, that's right. Sorry, it's all a daze. It's all kind of crazy. But and so I moved to Alaska, and I kind of had the rest of my journey kind of there in Alaska, going into the channeling content, and I would get scared. God send somebody, and somebody would, a random Christian girl. At that point, I wasn't asking for a person to be like, I need you to tell me. Like, no, I just like send a Christian to comfort me. And I was just out and about, and this Christian lady walks up to me, and I'm just in a gift store, and she's got a piece of chocolate, and she just looks at me and she smiles, and she says, "Do you want a piece of chocolate?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'd love a piece of chocolate. You got fucking chocolate. I'll take your goddamn chocolate." And so she offered me chocolate, and we chatted for a touch, and I felt better. And she went on her way with her family, and I went on my way back to my demonic stuff. And eventually it got to the point to where I started dreaming about books. I dreamed about 2 books. I had 2 books, and this is, once again, guys, I hear from people in the comments. If you wonder, I'm a sensitive person. Okay, YouTube is probably not the platform for me. There's a lot of mean people on the internet. I mean, people on the internet, when they don't know a person, they're just so incredibly disgusting and mean. And I'd like to think that it doesn't hurt and it doesn't affect me, but for me in particular, a person who's had a lifetime of trash, I'm not gonna lie when I say stuff occasionally penetrates the armor. And so, which one is it? Did I pull it down? Yeah, it's right here. So I had a dream, and in the dream, I was trying to figure out the secrets to the universe, as one does, because medical school is not an option. I might as well just learn the secrets to the fucking universe then, if I'm not going to be going to medical school. And I was interacting with some beings in that dream, and this is when I started to have a lot of, when you leave your body once, it happens a lot. If you've ever experienced it, most people are never going to experience it. They're going to say it's a dream. It's not a dream. There is a dramatic, very distinct difference from being alive and having your body in the other room and being in a dream. I mean, they are 2 completely different states of being. But this was a dream. This was not me being outside of my body. This was a dream. In this dream, I remember asking these beings for basically the secrets to the universe. Bro, spilled beans. What the fuck is this? Why the fuck are we here? Why do we exist? Why do people suffer? What the fuck is going on? If I'm going to be living this kind of a dog shit life, you might as well tell me why the fuck I'm here, right? And these beings, they wouldn't tell me much. They told me something that I'm not going to mention because it is a little bit too kooky for this channel. But they mentioned to go find, this specific author, and they mentioned him by name. They said, go find Alaric Hutchinson's teachings. And I was like, what the fuck? And they said, go find Alaric's teachings. And I didn't know how the fuck to spell Alaric. I don't know what that is. And so this is the book that I found. It was very hard to find, incredibly difficult to find. And it's a book on enlightenment, the Buddha kind of shit, right? So Alaric Hutchinson is the person who wrote this book. The name of the book is called Living Peace. And just to give you guys a peek of the titles, we'll just run through the chapters, the titles of the chapters, the table of contents. Feel free to judge. I don't care. If you want to leave a comment about it, whatever. First of all, you've got the Living Peace Code, the 5 layers of consciousness: mundane consciousness, collective consciousness, transcendent consciousness, cosmic consciousness, galactic consciousness, the 3 masteries, ego explained, the mastery of thought, the file exchange, the mastery of impulse, pause, process, and respond, the mastery of emotion, emotional wave surfing. I've mastered that bullshit. The vibrational aura, the love question, the river, the 3 attachments, and all that kind of stuff. Anyways, so that's what came to me. I read that book cover to cover, and it was unlike anything I'd ever read before. Enlightenment teachings, if you've ever looked into any enlightenment teachings, it's not something that it changes the script, right? It changes the idea that God is this lofty human being that's sitting up on a throne ready to put you into a jailhouse of eternal doom and gloom. And it changes the script to there's a whole of consciousness and you are simply a part of it, right? And imagine an ocean and you are just a drop of water out of that ocean. You are still very much the ocean, but you are simply a drop of water. And so when you're coming down as rain and you look around at all the other drops of water, you can see those other drops of water as drops of water that are completely separate from you, completely different drops of water that you have nothing in common with. But the commonality is that you all came from the same place, and that same place is the ocean, wherein lies the source of all creation, God, whatever the fuck you want to call it. And so I said, well, that's interesting. But once again, still very scared. This book came to me, and I remember telling myself, I'll go ahead and share this because at this point we've kind of gone through all, the main parts of the story. I'd be happy to cut it out here because I don't want to make the video 17 hours long. So I remember telling God, because at this point, even though I'd read this book, I had not formulated the belief that God was, this whole of consciousness. I had still had the belief that God was this separate thing. It went from a separate human being to this separate thing. And so I asked God, I said, God, look, I was living in Alaska. I was working for a company. I didn't have enough money to really do anything, but I was a business owner. I'm a businessman. I can create a business any time or where I want. And so I told God, I was like, look, if you want me to dedicate more time to studying this and actually figuring out what I believe, I need time freedom. I don't have any time freedom right now. I come home from work and I'm exhausted. And in order to have time freedom, I need about $6,000, $7,000, so that way I can start my business. And I left it and I went right back to work. And yeah, I'll just go ahead and share some of the stories. Nobody believes these, and that's cool. I have a check. I mean, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to share that lady's information. I mean, whatever. But I still hold on to the check. It's sitting in my car. I used it as a sign for myself anytime I get down. And I told God, I said, okay, if you want me to focus on this, I got to have money because I got to start my business because that's the only way I'm getting time freedom. And so I went about my day, and it wasn't but a couple days later, I was doing a job, and I ran into a woman, and she was one of my clients, and we were just talking. And I don't like when clients talk to me when I'm working. I'm working, I don't know. Sometimes I'm neutral about it. I guess it just depends on the clients. Sometimes you have clients that you really like and you have clients that you don't prefer. And if it's the people you don't prefer, please leave me alone in the room while I go do my thing. And so that's what it was. That's what it was for me. I was just trying to kind of keep to myself. But this lady, she's pressing me. She wants to know about me. She wants to know about my life. She wants to know about why I moved to Alaska. And she's not asking surface level questions either. Whenever I tell her, oh, I just came up to Alaska for adventure, she stops me and she says, nobody comes to Alaska for adventure. They either come here for work or they come for a broken heart. And I was like, you bitch. And so I told her, I came for a broken heart. And she asked me who did it. And I said, well, I didn't cry in her house, but we did have a conversation about kind of my ex-wife and my life and my life before I met my ex-wife and kind of what I'm going through. And she says, well, I don't know why I feel this way about you, but I want to offer you, if you need money to start your company up here, I am more than happy and willing to fund it. I can write you out a check for $10,000 right now if you'd like. And in the moment, I was so baffled by that offer and that I rejected it. But I didn't reject it completely. I told her, I was like, wow, that's a lot. That's a lot to take in. Let me think about it. Let me take your number down. I don't need it right now, but, let me take your number down. And in the future, if I change my mind, and she's, yeah, sure, that's fine. Yeah, and so I went back home and I came up with more excuses because I didn't want to do, being a business owner, it's stressful. It's very stressful. It's incredibly stressful, This is why when I hear an employee who says, oh, you're so happy because you make all that money. It's like, you have no idea. You have no idea how hard it is to be the sole person responsible for every little problem that exists. And nobody in their right mind would do that shit for a standard salary. No one in their right mind would do that shit for a standard salary. And so I pray to God again. I say, God, look, it's not all just money, man. I don't know what to tell you. I've got taxes I got to file. I got to do this. I need a CPA. I need an office space. I need all this bullshit, because really I just didn't want to fucking start my own business again. Yeah, I can do it, but it's always a bitch. I mean, it's hard, and it's frustrating and it's annoying as fuck. But it works. I had a business strategy that worked consistently, but I hated it. It doesn't change the fact that I hated what I did for a living. And so it was maybe another couple of days. I was working in a pastor's house. And once again, kind of same thing. The whole Christian thing came up. I didn't really want anything to do with it. I was just trying to fix the damn refrigerator and leave. And the guy says, and here we are chatting again. I don't know why. And it's actually really interesting. I found out later that this guy is friends with my high school best friend's mom. That was really interesting. But I didn't want anything. I didn't want to do it. Excuses. I need a CPA. I need office space. This guy goes, I don't know why I feel this way about you, but I feel like God wants me to offer you my resources if you need an office space, because he was a business owner. He was a pastor, but he was a business owner. He had a successful company the dude made I would say minimum, he was doing about 500,000 a year, 400,000 a year. I'd say about 400,000 a year is maybe what he was making. And I said, sure. Let me take down your information, kind of gave him the same spiel. I didn't need an office space or a CPA or any of that shit. It was just excuses, what it came down to. But it was such overwhelming evidence for me that, okay, God or whatever the fuck wants me to go down this path, so I'll go down this path. So I called the lady back up and I said, okay, I don't need $10,000, but, I could use a few thousand in helping me start up my business. And she wrote me out a check for $6,000. And so with that money, I started my business, and for the next 2 to 3 months, I just stayed at home and studied, and I occasionally went out to work. Whenever I would do a job, I would make, damn near a week's income of what I was making working for the company in a single day in like 3 hours. And so I'd just spend the rest of the week at home and just kind of read and study and all that kind of stuff. And it finally got to a point where what happened? I'm trying to remember, because this was a couple of years ago. Oh, that's right. It finally got to a point to where I accepted the idea that God was just this consciousness, and that we were all connected by having a shared ancestry, basically, right? By having a shared origin point as a soul. And the understanding that, just because a person has a soul doesn't mean that they are a light soul, They could be incredibly dark individuals that prey off of other people, and, narcissists, and, the entire world is their oyster to be controlled. And, I had a bunch of spiritual experiences there. People don't care about them. It's whatever. If you're interested in them, we can chat. But for the most part, it'd take too long to get through all that. And so, this is where I had an issue, because I understood the Enlightenment teachings. I had read a lot of Enlightenment books. This book came to me. Another book came to me. And I just started kind of following the rabbit holes and figuring out where they went. But it still didn't change the fact that I hated myself, right? Cool, I've got all this knowledge, or information, right? Whether it's knowledge or not, whatever. But cool, I've got all this information, but it doesn't change the fact that I still hate myself. When I look at the mirror, all I want to do is bash that dude's head in, and so that's where, and I still had, even though my family was 4,000, 5,000 miles away from me, they still affected my everyday joy. I couldn't be happy. I was 5,000 miles away from my family, and they were still ruining every day for me. And, whenever I was living in Texas, I convinced myself that my proximity to family was the problem. If I could just get away from my family, then I could live a happy and free life. And here I was 4,000 miles away from my family, and I still couldn't live a happy and free life because I was so pissed off. They were consuming my every day, my every thought. And so this is where I had to start going down my forgiveness journey and, and my self-love journey. And, people, they don't like to hear the forgiveness journey. I get it. I don't like to hear the forgiveness journey either. It feels so much better to hold on to your pain than to let go of it. But the reality is that holding on to your pain is only hurting you. I can't tell you how much it hurt me when I would break radio silence to call home to find out that everybody was doing so much better now that I was gone. And that things were so much better, so it seemed, now that I was gone. And that only made me more upset because in my mind it reinforced the idea that I was the problem, right? Which only made me want to, end myself more. And so eventually this is where you guys are, I'm really going to lose a lot of people here. I decided that I was going to, I decided I was going to start going down a forgiveness journey. And I was sitting in meditation and trying to bring up every little thing that anybody had ever done to me. And I would forgive them. And I would forgive them, and then I'd go to lunch, and I'd be pissed off again. I'd come back, I'd forgive them. I'd go to lunch, I'd be pissed off again. I'd go back, I'd forgive them again. I'd go to lunch, I'd be pissed off again. It was just rounds to this shit of I wanted to forgive them, but a part of my body just wanted that fucking fight. It just wanted that fucking fight. And that's because your body wants the fight. So give your body the fucking fight, right? And so I would sit down and I would create these alternate stories in my head of how that situation happened. And I would let my body have the fight that it wanted to have. I would put myself in whenever I was standing, whenever I was a little boy and I was 5 years old and I was watching, I was 7. Yeah, when I was a little boy and I was 7 years old and I was watching my mom bash my sister's face in and smash her face up against the wall, I was sitting there helpless, screaming at my mom to please stop because I loved my sister. And I was screaming at my mom to please stop because I loved my sister and I didn't want her to kill my sister. But my mom wouldn't stop. And there was just blood everywhere. And so I gave my body the fight that it wanted to have, right? I put myself back into that situation and I stood there as that little boy. And I grabbed my mom by the fucking hair and I pushed her up against the fucking wall. And I told her, you don't treat your damn children like that, you piece of shit, right? And I gave my body the fight that it wanted. And then finally, I was able to let go of it. And then something else. I've had a lot of issues with my mom. And so it was something else that my mom did, or something else that my brothers did, or something else that my sisters did, or something that my dad did, or whatever. All my family members. I was the youngest. So you can imagine this whole bullshit that, the youngest gets that. Yeah, not in every fucking family. So I kind of had this thing where I would forgive a person, I would let it go. I would give myself love, and I'd hold myself in love as that little child or as that young teenager or whatever I was at the time that I was going through that, or as that young adult. And if something kept coming back up, I'd go back in and I'd let myself have that fight that my body clearly wanted to have, that standing up for myself that my body clearly wanted to have, right? My body could not let go of it until I rewrote the story. And so sure, there was reenactments, not like physical reenactments, but like mental. There's mental reenactments of me, beating the shit out of my dad, of, taking a baseball bat to my brother, of whatever. It was just giving my body the fight that it wanted to have at that time that I was completely hopeless and helpless. And as I allowed my brain to rewrite the stories that my body wanted to have, letting go was so much easier, because then the story that I was the victim in that situation wasn't the case, because now the story was I stood up for myself and I showed that POS, what happens when you mess with me, even though I'd be like 4 years old and completely helpless. Doesn't matter, right? And so then it was the self-love journey, right? And that's just where I stopped judging myself. I stopped judging myself for my thoughts. I stopped judging myself for the perfection thing. There's so many things that I judge myself for. I judge myself for the way I look, for what I ate, for the way I spoke, for the way my nose looked, for the way my shoulders were, for all that kind of, every little tiny detail. You know how it is. You judge yourself for every fucking thing. You call yourself a stupid idiot. You call yourself an idiot. You call yourself dumb. You call yourself stupid. You call yourself retarded. I gave up all that. Because if you are in love with yourself and you love yourself completely, you don't call yourself stupid. You don't, right? When you're completely in love with yourself, the words, I'm an idiot, or John, you're an idiot, never come out, because you love yourself completely, right? Now, here's a side effect of loving myself that I didn't expect. The more I was able to love myself, and the deeper into my darkness that I was able to go, and I was able to love those parts of me, even the most shameful parts of me, I was still able to completely love those things about me. The less I judged people, right? It was kind of crazy. I don't know. It was just like a side effect. Like the more I loved myself, not like in a narcissistic way, right? Because loving yourself in a narcissistic way, that's completely different, right? That's some psycho shit. But, the more I loved myself for who I was, the deeper I went into myself, the more I looked at a trans person and said, that doesn't bother me anymore. The more I looked at a gay couple and said, that doesn't bother me anymore. The more I looked at a person who is drugged up on the side of the road, and I wasn't bothered by that anymore. And the reason why I saw the person on the side of the road who was drugged up and it didn't bother me was because the parts of myself that wanted to escape from my life, I loved that part of me. And so whenever I saw that part in somebody else, I didn't judge it, because I didn't judge that in me. It was just compassion. It was just, I know where you're at and I know what you're dealing with. I'm sorry that you're dealing with that, right? Not exactly, because nobody ever knows exactly what a person's pain is, because everybody feels differently. But yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, at that point in my life, that is finally when I kind of started hitting the deconstruction content. I really didn't hit the deconstruction content until extremely late in my deconversion journey. And that's why I'm realizing that, like, my path is completely unique to leaving Christianity, because I didn't take a logical approach outside of Christianity, because for the most part I was still very much in the chains of Christianity. I was trapped in Christianity. I believed in hell. I believed that Jesus was God. I hated the guy, and I felt like he didn't love me for shit, because why would you treat a person or allow a person to be treated this way, the way that I'm treated, that I was treated as a kid? But, you know, at the same time, you know, when you're praying and these things start happening to you, and those things start walking you away from Christianity, and when you get scared and you ask God and Jesus to show up for you, and they do in crazy ways, then you start to become comfortable in it, you know. And I didn't drop the fear of hell until maybe a year and a half walking away from Christianity. But that was my journey, right? That's how I walked out of Christianity. And the reason why I started this channel is because I wanted to support people in walking away from Christianity. Because, you know, Christianity is a very damaging religion. The reason why I speak on Christianity more than any other religion is simply because I don't know about any other religion. You know, I know briefly about Islam, just probably as much as any other random American knows about Islam. It doesn't sound great. It sounds incredibly oppressive. It looks like they're very mean. But that's all I know. I just know what the Americans know in general. You know, the propaganda that was taught to us in Islam. I'm sure there's beautiful people in Islam, but I just, you know, not my experience, so I don't talk about it. And same with a couple of different religions and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff that falls into the realm of not my experience. And so it's not my experience. I can't help a person there, right? You don't go to a dentist asking a dentist to help you rebuild your car. It's not his experience, right? He can't help you with that. And that's kind of how I am with anybody who's not in, you know, trying to walk away from Christianity, or they're having severe doubts about Christianity. You know, for me, I never had to leave God to leave Christianity. Christians hate that thought. They can't stand that thought, because their whole life is Jesus, and Christianity is the one true God and religion. And the idea that the very Jesus and God that I worship would tell you to leave Christianity is impossible. Thus, it had to have been the devil. It had to have been Satan. There's no way that, you know, it's impossible, right? And so when I first started my channel 2 years ago, I got a lot of hate from Christians. I got a lot of hate from Christians. And every video, I mean, every fucking video, it was, you know, you're fucking stupid, you're an idiot, you're, you know, all sorts of crap. And I just got sick of it, because, you know, another part of me is like, I know you guys don't treat each other any better than you're treating me. And so that's why I changed up my content to react to, you know, hold up a mirror to some Christians that were being extremely mean to me. I had a bunch of people that had subscribed to this channel just to talk shit to me. You know, here I was, a completely battered and bruised being, and I was latching on to the same God that I had worshipped since I was a child, I thought. You know, completely misrepresented. But I had latched onto the same God and said, you put me where you want, and where it wanted me was outside of Christianity. And to see my own family call me demonic, to see my own family tell me that I'm the walking around Satan, and to have all the Christians online, you know, commenting on my videos, because initially I was just trying to do more teaching content of, you know, this is what the Bible says, but this is not what the truth of God is. And they hated that. They couldn't stand it. And, you know, I got so much hate from the Christian community, which is funny. The Christians are such hateful people. Well, the internet is filled with hate. This world is filled with hate. It's just disgusting. It's so disgusting, you know. But I was getting so much hate from Christians online that, and I was getting very, very little people who agreed with me. I mean, on some of my original videos, I guess now it's probably not as bad. Maybe if I scrolled back and kind of looked at some of the earlier videos, it wasn't as bad. Maybe because people now have commented, because I've noticed that people have been commenting on older videos of mine. But man, in the moment when you're starting to just see those first comments roll in, because every time I post a video, there's a little notification bell that goes off every time everybody comments, and you just see it, man. You're a fucking idiot. You're stupid as shit. You don't know what you're talking about. You need to go fucking read a Bible. You need to close this fucking channel. All this kind of stuff. I mean, Christians are horrible, horrible people when it comes to the way that they treat other people. And it's not right, you know? And so I got so sick and tired of Christians treating me in such a shit way. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to hold the mirror up to these freaking people. Because I literally had people who would post in my comments that they would subscribe to my channel because they wanted to tell me how stupid I was in every single video I posted. And you have no idea how disheartening it is to continue. This channel's been up for 2 years. It's gone absolutely, you know, I mean, I've got a couple hundred subscribers after 2 years. And I really appreciate every single one of you guys that are here. But I've been at this for a very, very long time, and there's been no results here, and that's fine. You know, I don't do this because I'm looking to get rich. I don't do this because I'm looking to become a YouTuber. I do this because I love you guys. And I love, you know, the person that's struggling, the person that has the gun in their mouth. That's who I'm here for. The person who hates life, who's up screaming at God and feeling like God doesn't exist for them. That's who I'm here for, you know. The person who goes to bed hoping that they don't wake up in the morning. I'm right here, you know. And I don't ever care to make any money out of this. I trust that, you know, whatever the whole of consciousness is, and that's basically what I call it now. I don't say God. You know, because I think it misrepresents the God puts this as this singular being that's above everybody, and it's just not that. That's why I always call it the whole of consciousness, is because it's everything all in one, right? And so, and you don't have to believe that. Like I said, these are just my beliefs. It's just me, you know. You want to write in the comments how stupid my ideas are? Go ahead. I don't care. You know, I'm not here for you. That's what it comes down to. You want to type about how idiotic and how... That's cool, man. I'm not here for you. I'm here for the person who genuinely wants support. I'm here for the person who's genuinely struggling with their faith, who's genuinely struggling with the idea that there is a deity up there that, you know, sent their mother to hell because their mother was not a Christian and their mother was Hindu instead of Christian. I'm here for that person, for the person whose daughter died, and the daughter died doing something that was not Christian. And now they're struggling with this idea that their daughter is in hell. I'm not here for a person who wants to argue data. You know, I'm a scientist. I know how to evaluate data. Okay. I went to college, and I was very much cream of the crop, and I worked in a science laboratory evaluating snake venoms. I understand how data works. I understand how to interpret data. You know, I'm not here. This is not a debating thing. You know, I'm not here to debate people. I'm here to be me. I'm here to open my heart to the world. And I understand that there are people out there that when I open my heart to everybody, there's going to be people who see that and recognize that and love that. And there's going to be people who whip out their knives and start stabbing. I know. I get it. So, that's why for me it's like, this channel doesn't exist. Although I do want growth. Of course I want growth. I mean, who doesn't want growth? Everybody. It would be so much fun if we could hit, like 600 subscribers or 500 subscribers. I think that'd be amazing. And all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm not here for a dollar amount. I'm not here for, I'm not trying to become this fucking dude. I'm already the person I want to be. I already have everything that I want to have. Life gets tough, but it gets tough on everybody. You take massive losses in your life, but so does everybody else, right? But I just, I always feel like every couple of months, every few months, I have to make a video to just, this is who I am. This is me taking my clothes off, getting naked, getting raw in front of you guys. This is me. Accept me, reject me. I don't give a fuck. You want to take your cell phone and throw it across the room. Fucking do it. You probably need a new phone anyway. And I hear T-Mobile's got some good deals going on phones right now. It doesn't matter. I just don't care. And so, when I do interact, you may see me down in the comments. I'm just trying to get these videos to... I want more people to see these videos. The thing is, with YouTube interactions, if a video gets 300 views and 5 comments, nobody sees the video. Nobody sees the video, right? That's why the videos that go viral are the ones that people come onto the camera and they piss off a whole bunch of people, and people get so pissed off that they go into the comment section and let a person have it. Those are the videos that go viral. I'm not here for that, because I don't care for that. What does it benefit me? It doesn't benefit me a damn thing to be a fake person just for views. I'm never going to be a fake person. This is who I am. You can accept me for who I am, or you can leave. But, I just, I'd like to, I'd like to kind of have a separate channel where I kind of talk about more of the in-depth things. But, another part of me is just, I don't, there's so many other channels. At any point in time, you can go look up one of my friends. She was one of the first channelers I ever interacted with, and she was in New Zealand, and the stuff that I had experienced the night before, as well as on the call with her, it was just like, that was kind of my moment of understanding that, humans are connected. And that's why you can feel your pet. That's why when you can feel a person staring at you. That's why you can feel when there's a negative person around and you want to get away. That's why women's intuition is the thing, right? That's why when a woman says, I don't know, but this just doesn't feel right, right? There's that intuition that is, spanning across time, I don't care, guys. You can't beat me down and beat me up and bruise me any more than my childhood did. I've died inside of myself hundreds of times already. And I can't tell you how many times I've put a gun to my head. I just don't care. I just don't care. So, I know this was a really dark video and a really dull video and an absolute killjoy. This is also why I don't record these videos that often, because they're dark. They're very, very dark. And, whenever a person gets to know me, I always caution them because I say I was born in darkness. And if you are uncomfortable with darkness, then you're uncomfortable with me because it's all I knew for 25 years of my life. So, okay, I love you guys. And I hope you guys the best. I wish you guys the best. If you're still watching, Rockstar. If you're actually still fucking watching, I want you to comment down below. Straight Savage. Do that. If you're still watching, comment down below. Straight Savage. I might send you something because I will be shocked if somebody actually makes it this far. DesertSpring111@gmail.com. That's my email. Feel free to get in touch with me there. And then also Wednesday nights, 8 p.m. Central, I'm going to start live streaming. And it's just grief support. That's all it is. If you're struggling, if you've got life you're dealing with and you have nobody to talk to, I will be there. Wednesdays, 8 p.m. I'll have a phone number. I'll have a public phone number. And you can just call in through the public phone number. And of course, people are going to hear you. People are going to talk, but you'll remain anonymous as long as you don't say any of your information out online, right? You can be a voice on the internet. There's nothing wrong with being a voice on the internet. I can always say it's AI. And after the session is over, the live streams will not be saved. There's no part of the live streams that are going to be used for any sort of clipping, for any sort of nothing. It's a private space. Okay. Now, if somebody records it or if something, I can't guarantee that. All I can guarantee is that on my side, I'm going to do my best to keep it, and if comments get out of control, I'll be banning people, all that kind of stuff, because at the end of the day, I'm here because I love you guys. I'm not here because I need anything from you. I'm here because I love you. So, okay, cheers, and we'll see you in the next one.